here that we didn't get any audio. We're checking out to see we got that technical difficulty taken care of. Give me a signal. I see some people watching, Brian Eastman, Jackie Kinsley, May, and these people. But Dick Roberts said he didn't have any audio. So we're going to assume you've got audio, Ken Hillier, until we hear differently. We're going to assume we got audio. And we're going to crank it up again and make sure that you're with us through the beginning of the show. You can see our sign back there, no collusion, only fake news and media lies. And Jackie Kensler says we got it now. Thank you very much. So, you know, the beating shall continue till morale improves. And we have little germs and things that get into stuff around here. But that's technical world. We got it fixed. Now, let me point out something to you that is one of the things I was talking about before we had confirmation we had audio. And that is the men's cuddle group. And that's where I was going when we started getting all the, hey, can't hear you. Men's cuddle group caused a lot of consternation among the real men yesterday. I got a lot of reply from that. And people were saying, oh my golly, a men's cuddle group and stroke your hair, stroke your beard. And so Jay and I talked about it before we went on the air. And there really is only one cuddle group either he or I can relate to, okay? And that is the goal line stand, right? That's our definition of a men's cuddle group. You ever seen that pile up at a goal line stand where you got the nose guard, root hog, or die, and everybody goes low, and you try to stick the guy coming over the top with the ball, with the linebackers coming over the top on the other side, and collision, and everybody's on the ground yanking on people's face masks and poking eyes and all that stuff? That's the real men's cuddle group, is it not, Jay? Huh? All right. Well, what we got going on today is a very interesting kind of assault that's begun in earnest on the part of the Democrats going after, of course, one Donald Trump. And it's nothing new about that. It's something that we expected all along, and it's just beginning to get its jet engines warmed up. But one of the things that happened yesterday, Politico noticed, and of course, as soon as Politico called this to the attention of Congress and the Democrats, they said, oh, this was just an accident. We didn't really do this on purpose. It's not something we planned. You know, it just came out this way. And this is what it was. It came out in a single day that really is, they're claiming, oh, it's just an accident, with accidentally, according to the Democrats, Trump was hit with a one-day investigative assault. And we're going to go through what the components of this investigative assault were, and then talk a little bit about how realistic they are and what part of it is a circus barker and step right up and, you know, see the lady with 6 arms and all that stuff. In a single day, the House Democrats demanded President Donald Trump's tax returns for 6 years. And Trump's already come out with a funny reply. He says, only 6? They usually ask for 10. Now, let me just say this about the tax returns. Is this the same IRS that Obama used to weaponize against the Tea Party and groups that he didn't like, that challenged his political positions? And he used the lowest learner who took the Fifth Amendment and still, by the way, gets a retirement and never got any consequences for stonewalling all the questions and everything about, you know, did you not pull tax returns to punitively address people who didn't agree with you politically? Is this the same IRS that's now being weaponized again? Of course it is, by the House Democrats. They want to get a 10 years worth of its financial records. And what they want to do with all this stuff, and we'll preface this with a comment, they want to just pour through this stuff and see if they just can't find something that then they can lie about, that they can do fake news about, as our banner says. I mean, nothing but fake news and you know, no collusion, fake news, media lies. So if this is, they've got to find a way to make it so that there's something wrong. So we know this. If you're listening to the news at all, you understand this is the tactic. And it's long extended what they call opposition research. And now, Bo, you're using the congressional committee run by the Democrats since McCain betrayed the Republicans and really tipped the scale and put the Democrats in the House. And you know that whole story. We've talked about it here on the Ward Scott Files. So they want to prepare a subpoena also for, of course, the Ghouls report from the Justice Department. And this is a triple-headed attack. They want a decade's worth of his financial records. This is before he ever became the president. They want a decade's worth of his financial records. So I guess what they're going to try to figure out is, did he owe any Russians any debts, and now he's paying off while he's in the White House, and da-da-da-da-da-da. You know, I talked this over with somebody the other day, as I think I said this yesterday, as a young man running for the, to be the mayor of the city of Alachua, and somebody was saying, well, the guy doesn't have any any political experience. I don't, you know, so what difference does it make? I mean, really, Trump didn't have any political experience. It's how smart you are and what you do when you get in there and how much time you devote to it and all the above. So this has been one of the complaints against Trump, is that you didn't play the game the way the game is supposed to be played. You came, you did an end run, you just used your personality, or, well, you couldn't even have used that because you don't have one, so you must have just cheated. That's the only way we can figure out you pull this off, is you just flat out cheated. So then they begin to cheat to prove there's a cheat. And this is really where we are. We're in a time when there was once upon a time a movie called Dr. Strangelove, which predicted all this kind of gobbledygook would come about, and now it's come about in our culture. So he's got three things they're looking for, at least right now. The only thing about these three things, they came all in one day, all right? And one of them was the tax returns for 6 years. The other was a decade's worth of his financial records. And the other was the full Gould report. And they probably won't get any of it because Trump can tie it up in the courts and it can take a couple of years. And he can end up using this as a campaign plank in his platform and say, these guys will not leave me alone. They will not stop harassing me. And I think, back to what I suggested to you that made Martin Luther King's movement work, was that he got his people to believe that if the dominant people completely dominate you and you don't resist, you will soon be championed as the underdog, and that will become a dynamic movement, and that's how we'll bring about social change. He got that from studying Gandhi's passive resistance. And in this case, you know, I think it's already happening. I hear people saying, I'm so tired of this, let's get on with the country. And so, but they're not going to quit. This is the only card they have to play. They have no policies, they have no platforms, except the squirrely stuff like the Green New Deal or the Green New Dream or whatever you want to call it. And so the House Democrats, this is according to Politico, who's on to this now, they say the triple-headed attack, well, it was more by accident than design. It's also clear that April 3rd, that was the date yesterday, marks a turning point as far as Politico is concerned for the new Democratic majority. And they've got a grammatical error here. It drives me crazy. This is coming out of the Politico, John Bresman and Andrew DeCirio and Sarah Ferris writing this, and the three of them collectively don't know the difference between less and fewer. Let me have a point. You know, Jay's listening. We'll teach him something right now. Less is for that which cannot be measured. There is less enthusiasm, Jay, but there are fewer people, okay? So this is the way this works. But this, these boneheads here wrote this article say the following, and I'll correct it as I go. In less than 8 hours. Now, let me ask you, Jay, can 8 be counted? Okay, so that should be in fewer than 8 hours, okay? And if you say that correctly, they'll know you had a good teacher, because most people can't get that on their own. So in fewer than 8 hours, House Democrats moved to, and I corrected it, in fewer than 8 hours, House Democrats moved to an all-out investigative assault on Trump, one that the White House and Republican leaders blasted. Now, what this has also done, if you pay attention to this, it has united the Republicans and it has united Trump. I know there's a few rhinos in the Republican Party and all that, but it is pushing all of them together. It's going to further create these kinds of opposites and solidify, and I think the public is going to watch it and say, you know, it's just not fair. So anyway, this is an all-out investigative assault on Trump, and the Republicans are coming back and saying it's a huge distraction from the country's business. Well, this is the country's business to the Democrats. To confuse and obfuscate is the country's business to the Democrats. They want to get away with any kind of census report that tells you who's a citizen. They want to make porous the immigration stuff and pack it with all those things, and then promise them all the entitlements and come across with a social program, that Medicare for all and all this kind of crazy stuff. And they want to ignore the failed examples of that. And the best one we got right now in the world's laboratory is, of course, Venezuela, where they don't even have water. Now, started out they didn't have power, now they don't have water. I don't know how the people exist there. And yet, you know, power clings to power, Maduro clings to power. So, of course, Trump, and rightfully so, was immediately dismissive of this request. And this was made by the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. That's just one of the guys. Of course, we got Fat Jerry and we've got Sleazy Cummings in there. And then on top of that, we've got Bug Eyes Schiff. So we've got quite a crowd of characters that are chairs of these committees, and they have only one-way vision. They don't see both ways, and they are in power, as I say, because of McCain betraying the Republican Party, voting down on Obamacare. If you don't understand how this worked, voting down on Obamacare rejection, and that created a plank in the platform for the Democrats, and that was health care. So, and health care has become something that's obviously going to be a plank in the 2020, and Trump has decided to put off any health care changes until after the election. And that way you can use it as a promise to make it better than it is. And the horror stories I get, now there's some people who have benefited from Obamacare. There's some who were marginalized in the very first. But what it's cost them is they're now part-time at their jobs, because the corporations cannot buy health care for their employees at the Obamacare price if the employees are full-time. So they cut the employees back to part-time. You can go around and do a survey of this, ask your business people about it, and you see that they can't afford to have as many full-time people, so they increase the numbers of part-time people. Therefore, they don't have to buy insurance for them. And that's one of the big perks, is insurance. And people are paying $600–700 easily without any stretch of the imagination a month for insurance, health insurance. Now that, that's bigger than more, that's pretty darn steep to be out there. And then a lot of them aren't using it. And I tell them, well, you don't have a choice, because all of a sudden, as Coach Spurrier said, something can jump out on you, and the next thing you know, you got to have it. So this healthcare thing is going to be, of course, an issue. And meanwhile, they're not trying to work on that, get together on that, solve that, do anything with that that's responsible. All they're trying to do is bring down Trump, and they can't bring him down now because you can tie this stuff up in the courts into 2020. And this was pointed out at Eric Holder and Fast and Furious and all that stuff. It's still out in the courts, and Holder, by the meantime, has gone into private practice and dropped the whole issue. So he got kicked out of government. So some of these guys eventually are perpetrating this hoax on mankind will eventually get kicked out of government. You can count on it. So, as Trump said, is that all? We are under audit, and Trump's been under audit all the time, he says, and despite what people say, and he says, I'm always under audit. It seems like I've been under audit for many years because the numbers are big, and I guess when you have a name and you're audited, So he's not, this is not his first rodeo. So they want 6 years of the president's personal tax returns, as well as the returns of some of his business entities. And of course, you know who's going to get caught up in that. Any of the accountants that work for him, any of the lawyers who work for him, all that can get involved, because they can be asked to vouch for this, that, or one thing and another, and you get this whole thing, a bunch of dominoes, and eventually they hope they can get into somebody who'll squeal and say, oh my golly, I know something nobody ever asked me, and if you put me under oath, I've got to tell you. That's what they're really hoping will happen. And so they got, legislative, legal, all these kind of things they're trying to get after. And they say it was accidental. They dumped them at him all in one day. But it's probably just the beginning. There'll be many more than just 3. So it's political fishing, according to Chuck Grassley, who's a Republican from Iowa, who's the Senate Finance Committee chairman. Of course, the Senate right now is different in tone and content than the House, because thankfully it's still run by the Republicans. So. And they've got to sign off on anything that ultimately comes over there in the terms of impeachment and that and whatnot. And there's not enough rhinos even to make that happen. So we're going to get into the nuclear option here in a minute and what that all means. Because the stalling of Trump's appointees has been another thing that the Democrats have been doing. They've been tying these people up who are in the hopper for a couple of years in limbo, and they can't get into the jobs. And then they've been asked to dump their businesses' interests and get into, serving the country, and they've willingly done that, except they can't get confirmed. So there's all kinds. So they're going to go to the nuclear option. We're going to talk about that in a minute. The particular request here, according to Republicans, is an abuse of the Tax Writing Committee's statutory authority, and it violates. And all these guys don't care about that. They're abusing the authority in their request to have everything in the Gould's report dumped out in the public. They're breaking the law. The law says we can't put out whatever went on in the grand juries. And of course, Fat Jerry has said, well, I'm falling back on the Constitution. Fat Jerry, you guys passed the laws, okay? So what they're really doing is they're ignoring and breaking their own laws. And they're asking Barr to break the law, because Barr, by law, can't go reveal everything that these yo-yos want him to reveal. And therefore he won't. I'm pretty sure he won't, or, you know, he'll be a lawbreaker. So I think what's going to happen in the case, and we're going to cover this, not everybody's going to answer these subpoenas. Some of them are going to give these subpoenas the International Fighter Pilots salute and go ahead about their business and make it go through the court system and let the government straighten it out, and it'll take a couple of years to do it. So meanwhile, Sleazy Cummings, he's convinced that all the information is going to be pretty much available when they get a subpoena. I don't necessarily believe that. I think that some of them will give, particularly Sleazy Cummings in that crowd, they'll see through them, and they'll make it drag out. And I would ignore the subpoena. I mean, you know, make them surround the house and, you know, drop the tear gas in. I mean, you know, I'm not going to come down there and help these fools run a criminal investigation that they created the crime to do. So Fat Jerry is he's trying to play the card that, well, we got to make sure that future presidents don't behave this. You just had a past president who behaved this way. We got it all over the place. We're going to cover just some of the tips of the iceberg of it in a minute. We got Obama, as I said at the beginning of these conversations, yeah, take the fifth the way Lois Lerner did. Lois Lerner went down there from IRS and gave him the International Fighter Pilots salute and said, I'm not answering a single thing. Furthermore, I'm taking a fifth, and you don't like it, take me to jail. And never did. Plus, she stayed in the system, drew a check, and got a retirement. So it's all political grandstanding, but it's going to, you know, it's going to be weary. It's going to make the public weary, I'm pretty sure. And but I wanted you to know the fact that yesterday they dumped 3 things on him at one time and then claimed, oh, we didn't deliberately do it that way. I guess what they're really saying, that is, if they wanted to deliberately do it that way, they would have dumped 5 or 6 on him. So what they're trying to claim now with these subpoenas, because they're suspicious that these Democrats are suspicious that some of them people will ignore subpoenas. So what they're saying now, we're looking for voluntary cooperation and response, okay? Looking for voluntary participation, yeah. Well, that's important for you to put in your notes. An accidental hit, all right? A one-day accidental hit. Now, as I say, Sleazy Cummings asked one of Trump's tax firms and to pony up all the information they got to him, and Politico's onto this. And Politico, as I say, is not a big fan necessarily of Trump, but there's an accounting firm that the House Oversight and Reform Committee, you see they've added that word reform, that adjective, to this noun committee, and Sleazy Cummings runs it. An accounting firm is asking the House Oversight and Reform Committee, which is Sleazy Cummings, to issue it a subpoena before sending lawmakers 10 years of President Trump's financial records. In other words, we're not coming down there voluntarily. Don't request this of us. We're not going to do it. And if you subpoena us, we'll probably run it out through the courts for a couple of years. So it's all come on down and see the lady with 6 arms at the sideshow at the circus. Of course, the firm said, we intend to turn the document over, but you're going to have to come. Basically what they're saying is pry them out of our cold, dead hands. Now, Sleazy Cummings told reporters that this outfit, Mazars USA, which is a tax and accounting firm, has asked the committee for a so-called friendly subpoena so they can formalize the process of complying with the panel's request. And so Sleazy's in a conversation with them, and he says, well, we'll get that to them. And so Sleazy has formally requested the documents. He did it last month in a letter, and so already, you know, they've dragged it out a month, Trump's tax. The friendly subpoena is just a soft kind of request that, you know, we won't hold you in contempt of Congress if you just come down here voluntarily. And I suppose it's semantics. I don't really know. They're still, as you say here, fixated on breaking the law. So the letters, according to Politico, to Mazars USA specifically mentioned Trump's attempt. Here's what they're looking at. Trump's attempt to buy the Buffalo Bills before he became the president. And Cohen, the rat, testified, this is what got him going, Jay, that Trump inflated his net worth during the process of bidding for the NFL team. And that he also deflated the value of some of his assets in order to reduce his taxes. I got to tell you, friends, those assets, a lot of those assets are determined by property appraisers, and they're always undervalued. They're always undervalued. You go around here now and look at the property appraiser's value of the property, it's way undervalued. It's done that way deliberately. You can't keep track of the value of an asset in the real estate world when it's changing sometimes hourly, monthly. Right now, the state of Florida is going through tremendous changes, cataclysmic changes in many cases, because we've got the Yankees pouring out of New York and places like that because they've had it with those progressive left de Blasios and that crowd in Cuomo. So they're coming down here where there's no state income tax, and they get a doggone deal on a house. And, you know, you take a California property, it's about $1 million out there, and it'd be $500,000 here, if that. So what's the value of these assets? I mean, you know, and the rat is trying to say that, you know, a lot of times you don't want to go out and get a property appraiser and get all that. All that guy's going to do is go get comparables, and that's a moving target. It's basically the assets, what anybody will pay for it. And there's some calculations that could work. In the rental business, there's a formula. Whatever you get for the rents is a percentage of what the gross value of the house is, but that's also contingent upon location, 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 and that doesn't always work. So they're trying to pretend like all these things that calculate the value of things is cut in stone. And meanwhile, we've got people over there in Congress that have gotten wealthy that came in poor, and we're going to cover that in a minute, how Biden has set this up for, and as Plantation Mark says, I don't think the government requires you to keep more than, as Mark says, more than 3 years of your tax returns. So these guys are really making up rules on the fly for Trump and making it out to be a special deal because they're trying any way, shape, or form they can since there's no collusion, there's only fake news and media lies, as we've said in the banner. And we apologize for blocking out the other stuff there, but we thought no collusion, only fake news and media lies is really worth letting you have take a look at today. Yeah, right, Jay? I don't know anything about that. Jay asked me what the story was of cutting down the trees in the forest to get to the devil. I don't know, Jay. Maybe you heard that little nursery rhyme when you were a kid. You can teach it to me. But anyway, the rat set this thing off. You know, he's and he's a professional liar. So I don't know if you can make any sense out of him. And as far as bidding for the NFL teams, we just went through this with the AAF. I mean, do you have any idea what the value of the AAF teams were? I mean, this guy owned the Carolina team. He pumped $250 million, $250 million into it, and realized that that wasn't going to work. It was a money pit, apparently, and this dumped it in with 2 weeks left to go in the season. And so what's the value? What's a value, as they say in the car business? What is the value of an NFL team? And it's whatever you can bid and get, and whoever's goofy enough to buy it. And you know, we got NFL teams that don't have the value that you paid for them. I think Jacksonville Jaguars comes to mind. It's not really a big enough city to support a professional football team. And you can go over to the Jacksonville Jaguars and take a look at the stadium, and they got seats blocked out, so it doesn't look empty when they show them on the tube. So this financial record thing and the assets and the value is another smoke and mirror deal that is just going to waste time. And what's amazing to me is how these idiots are really ready and willing to just waste everybody's time on this just to do what? Feed it out up there to the media, who will create fake news and lies out of it. That's the point. But it's interesting that Politico, who normally would have been susceptible to this, has begun to back off a little bit about this, and that's why I'm taking some time to reference Politico, because they've made a little bit of a turn in the road here, unlike CNN and some of the others. They've made it, and MSNBC or whatever it is. This bunch has made a little bit of a turn in the road. Now, the local Mexican Sun here hasn't, but there are some reporters on the Mexican Sun who have, and they can only report. Look at the scowling face of Sleazy Cummings. I mean, that guy is. Oh, the party's turn out the lights. The party's over. He should have been booted out and given an Uber ride home a long time ago. Really. So these committees have been busy, and Politico's on to it. And I thought that would put that in your notes today, students. Now, there's a guy named Wilbur Ross, and I wanted to give. This is another Politico deal that they're kind of on it now. And they're looking at these guys to see how they're reacting. And he's a Commerce Secretary, Wilbur Ross. He's declined a second invitation to testify on President Donald Trump's budget request as House Democrats prepare to subpoena documents related to the escalating battle over the 2020 census. So in a letter to the House leaders on Tuesday, a couple days ago, Ross said his scheduled appearance before a House Appropriations Committee on Wednesday, which is yesterday afternoon, would be a distraction from the budget discussion. So they rejected his offer to send other senior agency officials, and he's just going to have an empty chair. He's not going to even respond to the questions from the department. He's not getting. He says he wrote to him. This development affirms that my appearance at this time would unfortunately distract from the department's important business before the subcommittee. So there you go. I mean, there are some people who are starting to say, this is stupid, okay, and I'm not going to take my time and support it. So we'll try to keep an eye on that and make sure that you're aware of it. It's a battle, there's a war. We've been talking about this a long time. The North is, in the North, the Democrats have been, well, they are the North. I mean, they really are. They have been defeated. I mean, they've taken some poundings on the battlefield, Jay. And so what they're now trying to do is, break the truce. They don't want a truce because they want to cheat and they want to get, the last, there's a good outfit right there we got on the screen. It really is a family organization you ought to patronize. You want to teach your kids some self-defense and have a good time as a family. So we'll see what happens. But there is a guy who said, I ain't got time to mess with you guys, Sleazy Cummings and the rest of the crowd. Now, there's some people out there who've been taking another look at this, and in a different kind of way. And this came out of Real Clear Politics, and I thought this was kind of interesting. There's a lot of people who are trying to look at this in a bigger picture, and there's a guy named Roger Kimball who wrote in The Spectator, and his article was really why Trump will win, and in 2020, and it's kind of interesting. In the next 2 years, anything like the last, he writes, Donald Trump will win 2020 in a landslide. And then he goes into the reasons why, and I thought they were probably worth talking over with you about what he thinks and what the reasons are, and why Donald Trump would win. And aside from the fact that he's being kind of made out to be a culprit when he's obviously been beat up already, they're watching. For one thing, they're watching Trump in these meetings where he goes, and all the people there just are crazy for him. But here are some of the tangible things that Kimball says will make Trump a winner. The stock market. It stood at 18,000 and change when Trump was elected. It's now closed just a couple days ago at 26,000. That's one thing. The stock market is up. Economic growth. I attended a meeting a couple of days ago where a representative of the Santa Fe College talked about the programs that are available at the college. And the provost who was delivering this information to the people said that enrollment at Santa Fe College is flat right now into these programs that would help you get various kinds of jobs because everybody's got a job. I mean, I thought that was pretty darn interesting. Here, a college like Santa Fe College is set up with programs to enable people to go out and get niches in our culture where they can participate in biochemistry, or they can participate in some of the construction thing, whatever. All these different trades and all these different scientific niches that are available, we have programs for at the college. The enrollment is flat. And why is it flat? Because everybody has a job right now. And this is historically true. We see the enrollment in the college go up when the economy is bad. When the economy is bad, Well, everybody comes back to school and they want to get prepared for the next, ride the next wave, and they don't have anywhere else to go, and so they come to the college. Now they're not coming to the college because the economy is good. So the economic growth, and I don't think the Democrats can do much to tamper with that. I don't think this Green New Deal or anything in the socialistic movement is even going to be able to make a dent in it. Unemployment is at a generational low. Black and Hispanic and Asian unemployment are at historic lows. And not only that, but the employment in question has seen significant wage increases for the first time in decades. Blue-collar jobs right now are better paid than they've ever been. And not only that, but they're subject to lower taxes because of the design tax cuts that Trump put in. They also, tax cuts favor those jobs in those states that have not constructed their own tax policies around tax subsidies. So there are certain states that are doing very, very well. Judicial appointments. We're going to get into the nuclear option here in a moment. There have been scores of federal judges, in spite of the fact that the Democrats are dragging their feet and trying to filibuster the thing to death. There have been scores of federal judges and 2 Supreme Court justices confirmed. And we know how ugly that was, as the president promised. But the president's long-running fight against illegal immigrants, part of which, is this debatable and controversial wall, is an endeavor that has great symbolic practice, according to Kimball. People are focused on this. They understand what is going on here. They understand that the Democrats are just being obstinate for the purposes of being obstinate. They're not interested in solving the problem. They haven't been interested in solving the problem. Those congressional people have been there forever, and this has allowed the problem to fester. So it was a central campaign promise of Trump, and the Democrats have, this is one, maybe it is the biggest one that they've lobbied mightily to prevent him from fulfilling. And that's really where they put a lot of their eggs in the basket, because they don't want that thing to succeed in any way, shape, or form. There are some other things that Trump has done. He's moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He's obviously made a statement about the Golan Heights. He's been very outspoken about that and taken action. He's also, taken care of military and looked at foreign policy and pulled people out of positions where they weren't needed. His North Korea thing and his determination to stand up to China, and I'm not convinced yet that in all this furor that ultimately everything will be run by the Asians anyway. We've been talking about Asian discrimination at Harvard and places like that, where the Asian is actually discriminated against because he does so well. And so they want to bump the Asian out of there and put the black in there. And that fulfills all sorts of ideological needs and whims and fancies here in the education system. But the Asian gets it done anyway. And anybody who knows anything about it, it's almost a cliche. At our college, our brain bowl was made up entirely of Asians, and there were some Indians on there too from India, but we had no Americans, and you had to go looking for the Americans to get them to participate in it, but you had to try to discourage the Asians. They were coming anyway to be on the brain bowl. So generally, lots of times, the average student just wants to do the average and get by, but not with the Asian. There's no such thing as just getting by to the Asian. So I'm not entirely convinced that, in spite of everything we're doing, China's still not going to ultimately, really control an awful lot of the world. But anyway, Trump is on that. He wants to make America exceptional. He's working away at that, and that's had a lot of success in it. So that seems to be a feather in his cap too when it comes to 2020. But of course, there's a lot of time that can pass between now and then. But basically, the die has been cast. We see the efforts that are being made, how they're being made, what's being used, what's being cheated on. I don't think anything's going to change because the Democrats don't have anything else they can change. And here nevertheless, we got Donald Trump's election, which was a stunning thing, all right, to many people. And then we've got his success in the first 2 years of his administration, which, according to the author of this political article, is the strongest success in the first 2 years of any memory of presidential behavior, even with the ghoul and the Russian collusion and all that nipping at his heels. So if and Kimball says if the next 2 years are anything like the last, Trump will win in a landslide. In other words, he must listen to the word Scott Files, because my contention is the more you pick on him, the stronger he gets. And so go ahead and pick on him. We welcome it. Go ahead and try all this stuff you're trying, because he's just going to get stronger. And what you're going to do is going to backfire on you, and he'll actually have a better chance of winning than he would if you just went ahead and run about your business. Can you imagine if the Democrats actually went about the business and tried to work on reasonable, how much more in favor they would be by rational people? Now, I'm not talking about the irrational people. I'm not talking about Holly Weird and some of these academics and some of these progressive left hysterical people. I'm talking about the people that could go either way, independents, people like that who listen to reason and who make up their minds after careful study. If the Democrats were actually to back off and become reasonable people, it would make it more difficult for Trump. But they're not doing that. I don't think they're going to do it at all. It's interesting to go over and see how Lightfoot won. There is Real Clear Politics has analyzed that. This woman, I don't think, it remains to be seen if she'll change Chicago at all. But there's been some, once again, she was an outsider. She had no experience in government per se. She'd never held public office, and yet she won. And she had been a federal prosecutor, and she was the 9th candidate to jump into the race for Chicago mayor 11 months ago. And yet she won Tuesday in a nearly 3-to-1 landslide over an establishment candidate, was this woman, Toni Preckwinkle. So she's going to be, so there's been study already of how did she do this, and who is she? She is 56 years old. She has a wife. They have an 11-year-old daughter. Now, that may make her more politically appealing to some people. She's a little bit different, but whether that makes a significant difference in the way Chicago is run remains to be seen. She mounted a strong, this is the guts of the story, she mounted a strong, steady campaign that broke nearly every rule in Chicago's political playbook. Initially, she was dismissed as not viable. It was written that she had no path to victory. She had what constituencies did she have? It was all gay blacks. There's not that many around of those. Surely they're not going to carry her. And yet, that wasn't the main. It wasn't the only draw that she had. She beat all the preferred candidates, though some labor organizations endorsed her. The union didn't necessarily support her, and all the way across the board. She didn't have any endorsements of city aldermen, which you often, heretofore you've had to have. In person, she comes across as reserved. She had no precinct captains with clipboards, making sure their voters got to the polls. She got into retail politicking and handshaking, and rather than relying solely on paid advertising, she went everywhere and met with everyone personally. And this is an interesting detail. She was on conservative talk radio shows in the morning and progressive talk radio shows in the afternoon. She didn't have any qualm about coming on either one. I can't get how low can you go, Bowtie Poe, to come on the show. Ed Brady, when he was mayor, used to be a regular. We had a lot of fun, and we took calls, and everybody could ask him a question. It was a tremendous access to the mayor. She also went to high schools and churches and block clubs, so she personally got in talk in front of as many voters as she could, and she talked a lot, and she didn't screw it up. She wasn't like Uncle Joe. Uncle Joe, you don't want that dude talking much because he will screw it up, trust me. He can't keep the gobbledygook. He's got marbles in his mouth, and he'll screw it up. Pelosi screws it up too, but I think it's because her wiring in her head is starting to be short-circuited. But there you are. She went throughout the city, meeting people firsthand, and that seems to be the deal. And she ignored the political machine, and she came in as an outsider. So we'll see how she does. Meanwhile, they're after Cortez again. She's been hit again. The Daily Caller says that, and I don't know how this Cortez is going to wind up. I think people are going to get tired of her after a while. a conservative group filed a 21-count federal election commission complaint yesterday against her, alleging that her unreported arrangement with the Justice Department's PAC violated campaign finance laws. I'm going to get into this thing with Gillum in a minute. He's made himself involved with the PAC, and the PAC's got about $4 million in it. And he's coming down here to be paid $10,000, and why in the world a guy needs to be paid $10,000 by the city of Gainesville utility prisoners is another, I don't understand it, but a lot of people don't. But that's your city utility, run by the city commission, which is a political arm of the Democrat Party. So there's all this kind of question that Ocasio and her chief of staff have held illegal control over the political action committee. And so they're looking into this. This is a 21-count Federal Election Commission complaint. And that'll keep her, what's good for the goose, I guess, is good for the gander, right? I mean, if you're going to issue a pronged attack on the Trumpster in one day, let's go after some of these people. This is kind of low-hanging fruit here. But nevertheless, we ought to get on with it and take a look at what she's been doing and with whom she's been doing it. Now there is a real big story here, and it involves, well, I'm going to go through it sequentially. It involves, first of all, Podesta and the Russians. And Podesta, was right in there playing he was Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign manager. So nobody's been shining the light on him, all the cockroaches in that kitchen. So he was the former chief of staff to President Bill Clinton, so he was a campaign manager of Hillary Clinton. He served on the board of Jubilee Unlimited, which is a defunct alternative energy company, from January 2011 to 14, and he resigned from the board to accept the job of counselor to President Barack Obama. But here's the deal. While he was on the board of Jubilee Unlimited, a significant investment in the company by a firm owned by the Russian government escaped review and scrutiny by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. Now, this is the very hypocrisy we're talking about. They're over there turning all the rocks over, trying to find out what Trump's relationship was with the Russians financially and business-wise, and here Podesta had a demonstrable affiliation with the Russians, and nobody did anything about it. It was a venture capital fund that got involved with Podesta. It was wholly owned, according to the article here. It was wholly owned by the Russian government, and it invested 1 billion Russian rubles, was about 35 million, in Podesta's company, and that accounted for about 46% of the 75 million invested in the company up to that time. And the founders were Newbar and Dr. David Berry, and they invested an estimated 10 million, and this was a venture firm. So what is so curious is the whole thing failed to get a review of the transaction, despite statutory and administrative guidelines. Any such transaction in which a foreign country or foreign government, you got to take a look at it. So that's out there as a potential smoking gun, and I hope that Lindsey Graham can get to that, because I've been maintaining all along with you that the very things that Trump is being accused of, Hillary and her crowd and Obama were in fact doing. And there's evidence out there. All you got to do is go get it, So we'll see how that works out. It's it's obviously that Russia was involved with it, and it's called Podesta and the Russians. And is it collusion for the Russians to give $35 million to a company with Podesta on the board while he's working with Clinton? It depends on which judge you find, I guess. There's also Biden and the Ukraine. Now, this is pretty darn clear that Joe Biden steered $1.8 billion to the Ukraine while his son bagged a sweetheart deal from their government. And Biden bragged about how he had run the prosecutor who was chasing down this deal and finding out what Biden's son had done. And Biden himself got the prosecutor fired by telling the Ukraine government, and Biden said on behalf of Obama and the government, you guys aren't going to get anything from us unless you fire that prosecutor who's looking at my son, who stands to gain personally from us doing business with you. I just got to tell you all that, if you go look at Trump But you also got to go look at Biden. I don't mind if you go look at Trump. You also go look at Obama. I don't, you know, you can't just be lopsided about this. I don't think that's the way to do it, do you? Unless you're just an unreasonably emotionally driven, blind-eyed radical Democrat. I mean, if you were fair and honest and, yeah, okay, let's look at them all. So the president of the Government Accountability Institute recalled how Biden, this guy named Peter Schweizer, Joe Biden's second son, this is his second son, received millions of dollars from a Ukrainian energy company called Burisma Holdings, while his father directed $1.8 billion in aid money to Ukraine as vice president during the Obama administration. Ah, boy, it doesn't get any nastier than that. And that potentially is going to be a problem for Uncle Joe, maybe more than his, what do they call him, Jay, the natural toucher. Yeah, he's the natural, oh boy, I like that one. What's wrong with Uncle Joe? He's a natural toucher. Yeah, huh. A natural toucher. Well, anyway, keep your eye on this. It's out there, it's documented, it's bona fide, it just hasn't been brought up. You know, you only got so many hours in a day to bring this stuff up. And if you're going to go after one, you got to go after the other, and we'll see if, right now, the only champion of all this that I can see is out there is Lindsey Graham, and I'm pinning an awful lot of hope on Lindsey Graham because we got nothing otherwise but collusion, fake news, and media lies, all right? That's all we got. No collusion, we got only fake news and media lies. And we got collusion, though, on the part of the demos. And Jay said when we put that sign up, isn't that some of the stories today going to contradict that? Yeah. Yeah, the Democrat behavior contradicts it because there is collusion. So it's not really all that difficult to find because the documents are all there. As we say, nobody's just ever paid any attention to it. Now, the other thing that they're going, and they're not going to get anywhere with this, but it is amazing that they're actually, you know, trying to do this. And we know that this is on their minds, that they can't get it out of their head, the Electoral College. Now, the Senate Democrats have come up, going to introduce, this is led by Feinstein. I can't believe it, you know, that she's still around. She's been around for, I don't know, 30, 40 years. The Democratic senators, according to Victor Morton in the Washington Times, are going to introduce, have already introduced a constitutional, well, maybe next Tuesday, introduce a constitutional amendment to abolish the Electoral College. Now, of course, the amendment has virtually no chance of getting the required 2/3 of both congressional chambers and then ratification by 3/4 of the states, and you can't get it done in time for the 2020 election anyway. But that doesn't stop them. You know, right now what the Democrats are doing is they're slinging mud at the wall to see what sticks. And they throwed this out there. They throw it out in there. They want to fight over whether or not you can ask on the census or whether or not the guy is a real, true, honest-to-God American citizen before he gets counted as a citizen. What's so unreasonable about that? I mean, that seems very reasonable and upfront. Well, no, they want to fight that. And they want to fight this Electoral College. Now, why? Because and you know, we've already told you what would happen. You'd have a couple of states running the country. It'd be California and New York. And certainly a couple of coastlines. A lot of the population, the megapolis, is right around D.C. all the way up to Boston on the one side, and then over there, L.A. and San Francisco, and maybe down to San Diego, all along in there in California, and they form the big centers, just like we do here in this county, where all the voting power lies in the city for the county commission, and nobody in the county can outvote those in the city, and we don't have any single-member districts to protect people. Now, I want to go over here in a few minutes I got left because it is a real interesting kind of story locally for us, and that's about this guy Gillum. Gillum is under investigation for ethics violations, and that is probably going to get some very serious treatment because the judge has ruled that the FBI agent can come in and testify, and he'll testify by phone so that they don't see who he is, but he will testify in the trial, and he'll be the FBI agent, and there's more than one, of course, that actually wired up and followed around this has been going on for a couple years before Gillum ever ran for president. Followed him around to find out about election fraud and, of course, all that kind of business, and found enough smoke there that this needs to be looked into a little more deeply. So we have got that, and yet right in the middle of all this, what do we get? We get $10,000 from, as I say, the poor old utility people here who are captured, the prisoners of the utility, to speak at a scholarship dinner in Gainesville, where not only is he going to be featured, but you're going to have the Chestnut family honored for something, I don't know what. Yeah, and years ago, Mr. Chestnut put her in a ditch. You know what I mean by say put her in a ditch? He had a big land yacht car he was riding in, and somehow, some way or another, he wound up in the side of the road in the ditch, and the law came along. And you have to understand something about the law. It can the cop on the ground. That's when the process starts, and that cop has the discretion to pursue it or wipe it under the rug or whatever. And the cop came along, and of course it was Chestnut, and he had an empty whiskey bottle on the floorboard in there. I think it was actually a wine bottle, but it's all whiskey. It's all alcohol. So he had an empty whiskey bottle on the floor, and he had the smell of alcohol on his breath. And of course, those two things add up to what? A causative factor for having the land yacht in the ditch. And of course, his reply was, "No, that whiskey bottle has been around. These are not my shoes, they're not my socks," sort of thing. And I've been to the dentist, and that's why you smell this, that, and one thing and another. I happen to know his dentist, and I happened to bump into his dentist, and the dentist was laughing with me. I said, "Hey man," I said, "I see where you were the reason that old man Chestnut put the land yacht in the ditch out there. It wasn't an empty whiskey bottle at all. It was you over-medicating the dude." And the dentist told me, he says, "He ain't never been to see me." So I don't know. That's the way it goes, man. When you're the elected and the connected, well, you don't get the same treatment everybody else gets. So nobody ever looked in to see if he actually did go to the dentist. And when they knew it was a whiskey bottle, I don't think he had to do a walk the line, or "I'll walk the line," or blow in the bubble or whatever you do. And so he got away scot-free. And so now he's getting honored. He's getting honored with Cynthia Chestnut, who got voted out of office by our help with Sue Baird, because she was so rude to the sheriff that the sheriff flipped and supported a Republican and helped us get Sue Baird in. And that was really the beginning of the Ward Scott Fraud Files, which was the first version of this show. And it really is so exciting to have done all that, the Ward Scott Fraud Files. That's some of the really best stuff we've ever done, and I was so fortunate to have a microphone then with which to share it with the public. It's very important that there be a microphone provided so that you can share these things with the public. And if you're hard-hitting, it's a little tougher to keep the microphone, because a lot of people don't want to hear the truth. They don't want to, they'll try to tune it out. And that was always the truth. I mean, it was just the way it worked. It was called the Ward Scott Fraud Files, and it was the meetings before the meetings. And there was a lot of hanky-panky went on in those things. But those things are all over on the WardScott.com site and the WardScottFiles.com, and the radio shows. You can all go listen to them if you want to take a listen to it. I didn't really get to the nuclear option, but but I wanted to close out with Gillum. I think Gillum is a dangerous person. He's passing himself off as a straight up kind of guy, but he's not. I mean, I'm just going to tell you that right now. I've looked into him quite a bit, gone back and talked to his teachers at Gainesville High confidentially. I've been told things about him there. I know who he hangs out with. Curiously, the article in today's Mexican Sun mentions Chuck Chestnut, but does not mention Chris Chestnut. And that was written by Andrew Kaplan. And Andrew Kaplan is by most times a pretty darn good writer for the Mexican Sun. There we go, the Mexican Sun, the Gainesville Sun. Good work, Jay. And Andrew's a pretty good writer, but he didn't mention Chris Chestnut. And that might be on purpose, because Chris Chestnut right now is an embarrassment. Chris Chestnut is, I don't know why the Liars Club hasn't booted him out yet and dropped the hammer and disbarred him. That's one of the most, and we got a conservative Supreme Court now. I don't know what they're dragging their feet for. Maybe they're afraid a race car to be played on them, but I can't tell you that. The list of transgressions is endless. I mean, it's just endless, the stuff that he's pulled around here on local community. And, that's how we got on to the Gillum's brother. because Gillen's brother had been called in to testify as a character witness. Can you imagine this for Gillen's brother, who, for Chestnut, who was ambulance chasing out in Texas of a dog mauling case where he didn't even have a license to practice. So, you know, he's probably got it in his head that it don't matter, the rules don't apply to me, and you know, what the heck, nobody's going to hold my feet to the fire anyway if they do, and I get special treatment. And by the way, it looks like the whole rap session is back on. It's going to be on the Mars property, which is out on Northwest 170th Street, as I understand it. And it's not in the city limits of Archer. It's in the county. Plan on riding out there and taking a look at it. It's going to be nothing but trouble, in my humble prediction. It's going to bring a lot of the people that you congregate around that place that, you know, potentially you already see what happens. You know, the rappers get shot. You come out of Hookah Lounge and guys are peddling wiki who are convicted felons and toting guns are convicted felons, and you know, it just don't seem to matter. It just don't seem to matter. I mean, the laws are for other people, they're not for us, and besides, those laws were all written by white folks, and we getting screwed if we're black folks. You'd heard the story before. So we're going to have Keith Perry calling in tomorrow to give us a report on Tallahassee, so we're looking forward to that. I want to thank Jay for helping me out today. Apologize for the little glitch we started. That's not really our problem. It's a technical problem, and Jay fixed it right away. So thanks for hanging around in there. And thank Big Daddy Productions. Thank all the sponsors, and we'll talk to you again soon. Warthog Command Center out.
Thank you. God bless you. And God bless America.
Do you want to put your business in front of 10,000 new customers? Visit wardscottfiles.tv today for more information on our advertising opportunities.